Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the debut album from Angel Haze, titled Dirty Gold. Now it tends to be a well-known fact in the music industry that they've taken several body blows with the rise of digital distribution, streaming, and iTunes, with major record labels taking the big heavy hits. And thanks to the connotations in popular culture associated with the record labels, thanks to endless negative portrayals in music, television, movies, etc., most people don't have the slightest degree of sympathy for said labels and would be happy to see them abolished entirely. Now, I don't really share this opinion. In fact, I'd argue that record labels play two pretty important roles in the music process that is often overlooked. For one, they handle a lot of the whole business side of the industry in terms of promotion, production, and distribution, leaving artists to be more focused on, the art. Like it or not, most artists, they aren't Jay-Z, and they don't have the business sense to handle this effectively. And on another level, record labels often act as an editorial board, something that artists they might not like, but it's an essential part of the creative process. Speaking as a published author, it's always irksome to go through editing and criticism of any kind. You like to always hold on to your baby in its purest form. But my work is often better for editing, and it's a constant acknowledgement that I'm far from perfect. Or, you know what, let's put this another way. While I'm all for preserving the purity of artistic digressions, people have to eat. And session musicians, producers, managers, and the rest of the personnel involved in the creation of an album, well, they've got to get paid. If an album doesn't sell well or doesn't appeal to the general public, that doesn't always happen. So yeah, record labels, they do have a purpose. The issue always becomes in how these record labels are run. Thanks to the CD blow to the late 90s, many major labels experienced obscene growth thanks to shady business practices, chart manipulation, and executive meddling in album releases, often with just a few singles and then a ton of bloated filler. And let's be honest, that boom was unsustainable. But while the labels' relevance have waned, their attitudes haven't exactly changed with the times. And for once, artists aren't taking it lying down anymore. Macklemore wrote several songs about industry politics on the Heist and ended up being one of the biggest charting successes of this year off his own independent label. And hell, I did a special comment on discussing RCA and Kemosabe's disastrous business decisions in canceling the Kesha and Flaming Lips collaboration Lipsha in order to rein their rebellious artist in. Yeah, let's see how well that turns out for them. So, you know what? I wasn't entirely surprised when upcoming hip-hop artist Angel Haze threw her label obligations to the wind and leaked her entire debut album in frustrated protest. Now, the story goes that the label said they would release the album in 2013 if Angel Haze finished it during the summer. But then the label went back on their word and scheduled a release for early 2014. She leaked the album in protest. On the one hand, applause for being gutsy and following up with your bluff. Most artists wouldn't do that. But on the other hand, she basically guaranteed that outside of her fan base, she's not going to be getting the same degree of promotion and publicity from her label. To say nothing of critical attention because, let's be honest, nobody covers albums released to mid to late December by people who aren't named Beyonce. So, you know what? Let's put all the label politics to the side. How's the album? It's okay. It's sad to think that the tumultuous release of Dirty Gold by Angel Haze might be the most interesting thing about the entire album because I was not impressed or moved by this record at all. Let me stress that it's not bad by any stretch of the mind, but it's a messy, messy debut album that really couldn't come together and really could have used all the promotion that the label will now be very reluctant to provide, so that's not a good sign. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bring back something that I haven't used since I reviewed K's debut album a few months back. My list of requirements to see what makes a strong debut album and see if Dirty Gold accomplishes some of them within this vein. So let's start with the establishment of personality. And you know what? I'll give Angel Haze this. She has personality, or at least energy. Indeed, her technical skill as a rapper, it's probably her strongest quality on this album, and she spits with impressive speed and very good technical chops. But I can't help but feel she's got a bit of a limited range, and this comes across whenever she's on the hook. She's not especially emotive in her singing, and she doesn't exactly sell vulnerability well, which becomes a really big problem when we get to the lyrics and the themes. And as a rapper, her wordplay and punchline lines, they aren't in the same league as an act like Dessa, mostly because Angel Haze doesn't really modulate when she's rapping. She's got intensity, to be sure, but she doesn't really vary the speed or the cadence enough as a rapper, or produce a lot of solid and memorable lines that would actively distinguish songs or make them stand out as something special. For me, Angel Haze sits between where Nicki Minaj once was and where Nicki Minaj is now. Now, look, that's not a bad thing. Nicki Minaj, she had a really bad 2013, and there's room where she was in the pop charts. So if Angel Haze wants to step into the pop rap mold, that's not a bad thing. But this takes us to the second thing, which is establishing her brand. And here's where we start running into problems, because this album doesn't have any sort of coherent sign of what Angel Haze wants to be as an artist. If she's looking to be the hard-hitting, emotionally evocative hip-hop act with songs like Black Synagogue and Angels and Airwaves and Black Dahlia and Dirty Gold, where she talks about religion and suicide and her relationship with her mother and self-esteem, well, there's a certain amount of emotional range and lyrical flair that you need to make these songs work effectively, at least for me. And here, I don't think it comes together. Only really the title track coalesces into something that's anywhere close to good, with a feel-good sentiment that doesn't really distinguish itself or come across as all that special. What's worse is that it becomes very painfully obvious from which she draws from other rappers, and when she wants to write her more emotionally impacting songs, and she's drawing from rappers like Eminem and Macklemore, both in her flow and in her delivery, which really doesn't help her stand out against the rest of the crowd or come across as anything more than a wannabe. So, you know what? Okay, what about on the shallower pop rap side of the spectrum, where Angel Haze doesn't need the same degree of emotional range? Well, you know what? Her punchlines aren't bad, and she comes across as a definite force behind the mic, but nothing really stands out or distinguishes Angel Haze beyond just being a solid technical rapper. And here's where we have to get into my third criterion: making sure that your artist is shown in the best possible light. And here's where we unfortunately have to talk about instrumentation and production, the big weak point on this record. Yeah, I won't deny that Planes Fly and Battle Cry, they're good in this regard. They're good songs, but that's because they're the only tracks with even solid or even remotely passable hooks on this album. And while the record does get better on its second half compared to the first half, it doesn't start particularly strong at all, thanks to a selection of terrible synth choices. I'm not kidding. On top of too many tracks earlier on just sounding too cluttered and with weaker percussion, the synths are just these squealing and watery things, and they lack anything close to a good melody, and they distract and take away from Angel Haze's performance. And while the production does have more texture than you'd expect, and some interesting rhythm sections that show an African influence, they do show up. Look, I just can't help but feel that none of them really add up to enough as a whole to really stand out and distinguish Angel Haze's material or music. So to summarize, look, a debut album should establish who the artist is, why they are special, and why the audience should care. And if I'm being honest, Dirty Gold by Angel Haze maybe only accomplishes one of those things. Yes, she's a skilled rapper, but as I've stressed in the past, that's my baseline for good hip-hop. And this record, it just doesn't do much beyond that. On a pop rap level, her instrumentation and lack of good solid hooks really hurts her. And while she's better in a more serious vein, at least in terms of discussing the subject matter, and that her intensity might be a better fit, I don't feel like any of her songs build to a satisfying emotional climax. She talks around the issues a lot with a lot of her intensity, but she never hits them directly, and that does mute the impact on this album. Now, that being said, it is a debut record, and look, Angel Haze does show enough talent to knock this album up a few points beyond being just strictly average. So with that in mind, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 and a tentative recommendation. Dirty Gold is a vaguely positive looking album that really could have been a lot better with a tighter focused. And look, Angel Haze, she does show some real promise for the future, so I will check out more of her material in the future when it comes out. But I get the sinking feeling that she'll be overshadowed by the controversy of her debut, and presuming she's not dropped from her label, I don't think this will end nearly as well as she's hoping. Let's just hope I'm wrong. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's anything else you'd like me to cover throughout the month of January is pretty slow, so I'm open to suggestions. I'd be more than happy to take a listen. But until then, see you next time.